On a quiet Thursday morning, a jogger spotted something unusual near the south end of Ashwood Lake, a woman's coat, soaked and tangled in a bed of reeds just off the shoreline. 15 feet away, floating face down in the icy water, was the body of 29-year-old Rebecca Lang. The discovery came just hours after Halston Creek's mayor, Charles Whitmore, delivered a televised address from City Hall, confidently announcing his bid for a fourth term. The headlines didn't mention the lake. They focused on the speech, the applause, the promises, the polished delivery of a man who had spent the last decade shaping the town's identity. But by noon, the story had shifted. Rebecca wasn't just another victim. She had once worked inside the mayor's office, quietly holding a position that kept her close to Whitmore's inner circle. On the surface, she was a junior staffer. Off record, she had been something else entirely, the center of a scandal that, once exposed, would take down not only Halston Creek's most powerful figure, but the political structure that protected him. Before the week was over, investigators would uncover a pattern of encrypted messages, concealed payments, and deleted reports. And behind every lie was a single truth. This wasn't just an affair, it was a cover-up, and someone made sure Rebecca Lang wouldn't live to expose it. Halston Creek was the kind of town that rarely changed. Tucked in the northern edge of South Carolina, it thrived on predictability. Red brick storefronts, quiet parks, and a community that valued order over noise. Population, just over 38,000. Crime, low. Gossip, high. At the center of it all stood Mayor Charles Whitmore. Elected at just 42, he had spent nearly a decade in office, praised for revitalizing the local economy and cutting crime rates. His image was carefully maintained: family man, public servant, and a symbol of Halston Creek's quiet stability. His wife, Eleanor Whitmore, ran the Community Outreach Foundation. Together, they were seen as untouchable. Rebecca Lang arrived in town 5 years earlier. She held a degree in public administration and quickly found work on Whitmore's re-election campaign. Organized, quiet, and efficient, she moved into a full-time assistant role at City Hall. To most, she was just another face in the office, polite, professional, and unremarkable. But those who paid closer attention noticed small inconsistencies: unscheduled meetings, late-night messages, extended office hours. No one said anything. In Halston Creek, people didn't question what they weren't supposed to see, until Rebecca Lang ended up dead in Ashwood Lake. On the evening of October 18th, Rebecca Lang left her apartment on Arbor Street at 8:41 p.m. Security footage from her building's lobby showed her wearing a gray trench coat and carrying a small black purse. She didn't take her car, she walked. At 8:52 p.m., she was captured by a city-operated traffic camera crossing 5th and Lawton. From there, the trail thinned. Her phone remained active until 9:17 p.m., when it suddenly went offline. That detail alone was enough to raise flags when her body was discovered the next morning. Initial response teams arrived at Ashwood Lake just after 6 a.m. The jogger who found her remained at the scene, pointing investigators toward the floating body. Rebecca's corpse was partially submerged, face down, with no immediate signs of struggle around the area. No blood, no weapon, no footprints but her own. Nearby, a single set of tire impressions marked the grass, but they had been partially washed out by early morning dew. Paramedics declared her deceased at the scene. Her body was transported for autopsy. She had no identification, but a fingerprint. Scan confirmed her identity before noon. The first report listed the cause of death as undetermined pending toxicology. The autopsy, however, provided more clarity. A blunt force trauma mark was found behind her right ear, a single impact, consistent with being struck from behind. Water was present in her lungs, but not enough to suggest drowning. Bruising on both wrists indicated she had been restrained. Defensive wounds on her hands suggested a struggle. Investigators searched the shoreline and surrounding woods. No murder. Weapon was found. Her phone and purse were missing. Her smartwatch, still strapped to her wrist, had been reset to factory settings. Digital forensics later showed the reset had occurred at 11:04 p.m. the night before. The location of the body raised its own questions. Ashwood Lake was more than 11 miles from her apartment. It was isolated, without pedestrian access after dark and bordered by private property and thick brush. The assumption was clear. Rebecca hadn't come there alone. Someone brought her. Within 48 hours, law enforcement pieced together her last known movements. They canvassed nearby businesses, collected surveillance footage, and reviewed her digital footprint. Her calendar showed no scheduled meetings that night. Her last text message, recovered from a friend's phone, had been sent at 6:13 p.m. "I think tonight's the end of it." No follow-up, no location shared. Halston Creek Police opened a homicide investigation. Rebecca's workplace, mayor's office, was contacted for access to her emails, building entry logs, and internal communications. The request was met with partial compliance. Staff provided her access card data, which revealed that 2 days before her death, Rebecca had entered the mayor's private office after hours at 7:26 p.m. She left the building at 8:09 p.m. No meeting had been scheduled during that time. Mayor Whitmore told investigators that the interaction had been brief and professional. A review of internal admin protocols. He denied any inappropriate conduct. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, he claimed he had been home with his wife. But his vehicle, a black 2020 Lincoln SUV, was logged on a license plate reader entering the Ashwood Lake perimeter at 10:58 p.m. and exiting at 11:22 p.m. The mayor denied driving the car that night, stating it had been borrowed by a campaign staffer. No documentation supported that claim. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a burner phone, discarded in a storm drain 4 blocks from City Hall. Forensics confirmed the phone had sent a text to Rebecca's number at 8:39 p.m., the same time she was seen leaving her building. That message read, "Same place. Don't make this worse." Her phone, still missing, never responded. 3 days after her death, investigators received an anonymous envelope containing printed screenshots of emails. The sender was unlisted. The emails were between Rebecca and a private legal firm, dated 2 weeks prior, referencing the preparation of a draft complaint against an unnamed city official. The emails mentioned retaliation, coercion, and threats of termination. The details were limited, but the message was clear. Rebecca had been planning to speak up. Search warrants were issued for her apartment, her cloud storage accounts, and the city servers. Detectives weren't only pursuing a murder, they were chasing a suppressed voice. What began as a missing persons call escalated into a homicide, and now it was becoming something larger, a political scandal, one that pointed straight to the mayor's office. Detective Serena Holloway took over the case on October 21st. Known for her methodical work and previous experience uncovering corruption, in nearby Greenville she prioritized data tracing, timeline verification, and internal city access audits. The first step was to expand the digital footprint. Rebecca's email history was pulled from both her city-issued account and her personal Gmail. Investigators cross-referenced server logs to identify email forwarding activity. One specific folder had been encrypted. Upon decryption, it revealed multiple PDFs, undated but time-stamped within the file properties, containing notes and screenshots of internal correspondence. One of the emails had been forwarded from an anonymous staff tip. A message exchange between Mayor Whitmore and an unknown contact, referencing her silence, settlement, and keeping it off the books. At the same time, surveillance. Records confirmed Rebecca had accessed the mayor's office a total of 6 times after hours over the prior 2 months. Always alone, always with no meetings officially logged. She never used her personal phone during these visits, suggesting she was cautious. That habit, it seemed, had been noticed by others. Fingerprint sweeps inside Whitmore's private office turned up nothing beyond common staff prints, except for a single partial on a paper shredder bin, later matched to Brian McKee, the mayor's longtime personal aide. When interviewed, McKee stated he had no memory of ever using the shredder and had no role in city documentation. Investigators marked it as suspicious, but not yet actionable. Attention turned to Whitmore's vehicle, the black Lincoln SUV caught by the Ashwood Lake camera system the night of Rebecca's death. The vehicle was seized and processed. Soil samples from the wheel wells matched sediment from Ashwood's lower boat ramp. Traces of carpet fiber, beige and synthetic, were lifted from the back seat. Those fibers were later matched to the coat Rebecca was wearing when her body was discovered. GPS tracking history on the SUV had been wiped, but forensic technicians recovered cached location fragments from the vehicle's onboard software. The route lined up with the plate reader timestamps and suggested a stop duration at Ashwood Lake of approximately 21 minutes. With physical linkage building, investigators executed a warrant on Whitmore's city-issued laptop. They found a hidden folder containing a single video file, dated October 10th, 8 days before the murder. The video, captured from an internal office camera not listed in the building's official security grid, showed Rebecca placing a white envelope on the mayor's desk. She waited 37 seconds. Whitmore entered the frame. The two stood in silence for almost a full minute. He picked up the envelope. She turned to leave. No words were spoken. The file ended there. Its metadata showed it had been opened 3 times. The last access was the day before her death. Parallel to the laptop findings, Detective Holloway's team issued a subpoena to a downtown ATM security system across from City Hall. On October 14th at 3:16 p.m., a man matching Brian McKee's description was seen withdrawing $4,000 in cash. The amount corresponded with a suspicious payment flagged in the city's finance audit, marked only as discretionary fund, contract closeout. No contract associated with the code existed. Investigators questioned McKee again. This time, under legal pressure, he admitted he had delivered the envelope to Rebecca 3 nights before her death. He claimed the contents were a confidentiality agreement and that he was ordered to give it to her off record. He denied involvement in her death and stated he hadn't seen her again after that exchange. Detective Holloway didn't stop there. The burner phone used to contact Rebecca on the night of her disappearance was still in evidence. Forensic review traced the phone's purchase to a gas station 30 miles south of Halston Creek. Security footage showed the buyer, male, mid-40s, wearing a baseball cap. Facial recognition software identified him as Richard Halford, an external PR consultant, who had worked for Whitmore during his previous campaign. Halford had resigned without notice 6 weeks before the murder. When located and brought in for questioning, Halford refused to answer any questions. His attorney cited potential self-incrimination. Investigators couldn't directly place him, at the lake or with Rebecca. But they did find one more link. Halford's bank account showed a $10,000 wire deposit from a shell company linked to one of the mayor's donors, processed 5 days before the burner phone was purchased. Meanwhile, a second anonymous envelope arrived at the Halston Creek Police Department. Inside was a USB drive. It contained a draft press release, unsent, written in Rebecca's name. It detailed the timeline of her relationship with Whitmore, her accusations of coercion, and a planned press conference to disclose documents of financial impropriety, tied to multiple city contracts. The file was dated October 15th. She was killed 3 days later. The investigation, originally focused on an affair and a single act of violence, now pointed to a multi-tiered operation. There were deleted files, financial trails, quiet bribes, and altered schedules. More importantly, there was evidence of coordination and intent to prevent exposure. Detective Holloway compiled the findings. The timeline showed a consistent escalation: Rebecca threatening disclosure, Whitmore initiating containment, and multiple associates involved in off-record interactions. Every effort was made to bury her accusations before they went public. By the start of November, Holloway turned her report over to the state attorney's office. Charges were recommended for obstruction, conspiracy, and, in the case of Richard, Halford, possible involvement in premeditation. The mayor hadn't just hidden an affair. He had overseen a sequence of actions designed to erase the person who threatened to reveal it. Just as the state prepared its case against Mayor Whitmore and his inner circle, the investigation took an unexpected turn. A retired systems analyst named Calvin Denton, who once managed the IT framework for Halston Creek's city records, came forward with a backup drive he had taken home months earlier during a departmental overhaul. He claimed the drive was supposed to be erased and replaced but was never collected by staff. The contents hadn't been accessed until now. Inside were logs of internal communications from the mayor's office servers dating back a full year. Among them were auto-archived messages deleted from employee inboxes, including those of Rebecca Lang. One particular folder labeled Routing Exceptions caught attention. It included a string of emails between Whitmore, his campaign treasurer, and an individual using a masked account tied to an out-of-state IP address. These exchanges referred repeatedly to an RL risk, containment timeline, and phase 3 coverage. Investigators cross-referenced the masked account with IP logins. The address had been used previously by Richard Kearns, a sitting city council member and longtime political ally of Whitmore. His name had not appeared in the investigation until this point. Kearns had been instrumental in approving discretionary fund allocations and managing public image strategy during Whitmore's last campaign. His role had kept him in the shadows, until now. When confronted, Kearns denied involvement. But digital forensic experts matched login credentials and timestamps to multiple deletions of Rebecca's formal complaints from the city's internal portal. A screen capture saved in the backup drive showed an access trail from his terminal, 5 hours after Rebecca submitted her final grievance. But the most damaging revelation came in the form of a surveillance video. Not from City Hall, but from the parking garage beneath a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. Security footage showed Richard Kearns meeting with Rebecca Lang in the back corner of the garage at 9:02 p.m. on the night of her disappearance. The footage had poor resolution, but both faces were identifiable. Kearns handed her a white folder. Rebecca opened it, appeared to speak, then closed the folder and turned away. Kearns reached for her arm briefly, then let go. She walked toward the stairwell. He remained in the garage for another 4 minutes, then drove off in a rental car registered under a false name. The white folder was never recovered. With this new timeline, the story shifted dramatically. While Whitmore had been the face of the cover-up and likely motivator, it was Kearns who now emerged as a potential executor, the one who may have coordinated the silencing itself. Investigators began tracing Kearns' financials. A single transaction, buried in campaign disbursements, stood out: a $12,000 payment to a consulting firm that didn't exist. The account had been opened 6 weeks earlier and closed days after Rebecca's death. The funds were never recovered. A whistleblower from inside the mayor's administration, protected under state confidentiality laws, came forward around the same time. She confirmed that Kearns and Whitmore held multiple closed-door meetings in the final week before Rebecca's murder. No minutes were recorded. One meeting lasted over 3 hours and ended abruptly, followed by McKee leaving the office visibly shaken, according to the witness. But the final piece came from a phone restoration. Though Rebecca's original phone was never found, a technician working with the case managed to restore a full backup from her synced cloud account. Inside were voice memos, short encrypted audio clips she had recorded across several weeks. Most were notes about work tasks, reminders, or meetings. But one recording stood out. Dated October 16th, 2 days before her death. It captured Rebecca's voice reading what sounded like a prepared statement. "If anything happens to me, I want this to be heard. I've made digital copies of everything. They have threatened me. They know about the funds, the erased reports, the threats. I told them I wouldn't stay quiet anymore. I'm not afraid of them anymore." The memo was 47 seconds long. It was her last recording. At this stage, the state's theory evolved. Rebecca had become more than a liability. She was a risk to the structure they had built, a structure that extended beyond infidelity and into financial fraud, digital manipulation, and conspiracy to suppress internal whistleblowing. With her preparing to go public, the priority was no longer silence. It was removal. Within 1 week, Richard Kearns was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with public records, financial fraud, and destruction of evidence. Bail was denied. Mayor Whitmore, now facing added scrutiny, was re-interviewed. Confronted with the footage and memos, he claimed ignorance of Kearns' intentions and maintained that he had only wanted to avoid a scandal. But when asked why he failed to report Rebecca's concerns, deleted internal correspondence, and approved suspicious transfers, he had no answer. The press, which had initially reported on the affair and resignation, now had a new headline: "Murder, Fraud, and Power: The Collapse of Halston Creek's Political Machine. Rebecca Lang hadn't died over love. She had died because she refused to disappear." The courtroom proceedings began on February 12th under the jurisdiction of the South Carolina Superior Court. Given the high-profile nature of the case and its deep ties to Halston Creek's leadership, the venue was relocated to Charleston to ensure an impartial jury and reduce local influence. Richard Kearns faced the first trial. The state charged him with conspiracy to commit murder, destruction of public records, fraudulent misuse of public funds, and witness tampering. The prosecution's case centered on digital evidence: the encrypted emails, surveillance footage, and the parking garage exchange between him and Rebecca Lang. They also presented Rebecca's final voice memo and financial trails pointing to the consulting firm shell account used to funnel hush money. The jury listened as timestamps, data logs, and financial records were methodically laid out. Forensic analysts testified that Kearns' city login credentials had been used to access and delete Rebecca's HR complaint files. Surveillance experts confirmed his presence at City Hall on nights when unauthorized access occurred. His defense attempted to downplay the severity of the charges, suggesting Rebecca's death was unrelated to their meeting and that the digital records were circumstantial. But the volume of evidence was too substantial. After 9 days of testimony and less than 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty on all counts. Richard Kearns was sentenced to 38 years in state prison with no eligibility for parole for the first 30. The judge cited his abuse of public office and calculated cover-up as aggravating factors that merited maximum sentencing. He was immediately remanded to a state correctional facility. 2 weeks later, it was Mayor Whitmore's turn. Though not directly charged with Rebecca's murder, his list of indictments was extensive: obstruction of justice, abuse of power, tampering with internal investigations, and destruction of digital evidence. Prosecutors played the internal footage from his office, the evidence of wiped GPS logs on his vehicle, and the altered discretionary fund documents. Testimony from McKee, the mayor's aide, placed Whitmore in active coordination with the documents meant to silence Rebecca. The voice memo, though not directly implicating him in the murder, showed he was aware of the threats and did nothing to prevent escalation. Whitmore's defense emphasized his cooperation and claimed he had been misled by others, particularly Kearns. They argued he was trying to manage a potential scandal, not engineer a cover-up, but the jury saw it differently. On March 4th, after a 10-day trial and 12 hours of deliberation, Charles Whitmore was found guilty on 3 felony counts: obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and abuse of public office. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6. During sentencing, the presiding judge noted, "Public trust is not a political currency to spend and bury. It's a duty, and this courtroom has seen what happens when that trust is traded for silence." Whitmore offered no statement. His resignation letter had been submitted weeks earlier, effective immediately. As the trials concluded, state investigators expanded their reach. An internal audit of Halston Creek's financial operations uncovered additional irregularities, tied to other departments, suggesting the misconduct may have extended further than initially believed. Several city officials were placed on administrative leave pending investigations. Meanwhile, Halston Creek remained under the oversight of an interim governance board appointed by the state. All existing council members were suspended pending a full review. A special election was scheduled for the following year to rebuild local leadership from the ground up. Rebecca Lang's family declined to participate in media interviews. However, a brief statement released by their attorney read, "She believed in doing the right thing, even when no one was listening. It cost her everything. But now, everyone is listening." The courtroom may have delivered sentences, but for Halston Creek, the punishment had already arrived in another form, in lost credibility, broken institutions, and a scar that would take years to fade. When Rebecca Lang stepped into Halston Creek's political machine, she likely never imagined how far its reach would stretch. She wasn't a public figure. She didn't hold power. She didn't seek attention. But she carried something that made her dangerous to those who did: the truth. Her murder exposed more than a scandal. It revealed a system built on silence, hidden behind press releases and ribbon cuttings, a mayor who protected his reputation at the cost of integrity, a councilman who saw people as pieces to be removed, a network of professionals who helped keep the surface polished while the foundation rotted underneath. The town didn't just lose a young woman. It lost its illusion of control, of order, of safety in structure. 2 men went to prison. Dozens. More fell under investigation. Entire departments were dismantled. But long after the court transcripts were filed and the news vans left, one question continued to circulate. If not for a voice memo saved in the cloud, if not for a forgotten backup drive in a retired technician's home, if not for a few missed steps in a carefully planned cover-up, would any of this have ever come to light? In the end, it wasn't the affair that destroyed the mayor. It was the truth they tried to bury, and the woman who refused to stay silent.